Good evening, good people of the internet, or anybody that has ventured their way onto my social media. Oh, I better get that off the screen. I can see myself on YouTube with a slight delay in the other screen, and we don't want that. That'll definitely throw me off. So, some people may have noticed, some eagle-eyed viewers that keep up with my social media or keep up with my X feed probably noticed that this is not Friday when I actually plan to do this stream. So I plan to do streams every Tuesday and Friday. I'm sort of moving these days around every so often. And I did plan to do this on Friday, but due to extenuating circumstances, i.e. we were doing a bit of house sorting, moving, let me sort that camera out, house moving and not house moving, but house sorting. Yeah, we've had a pretty busy weekend, and I was worrying at the time that there might be some furniture actually sat behind me in the backdrop. This is not a screen, by the way, this is my house. So, the Ellis Broadcast HQ, we were worrying that there might be a bit of disarray behind us. And then I said I was going to do it Saturday, and there definitely was disarray behind us. So we're here on Sunday. I don't like doing streams on Sunday. I was doing them originally, but it's I like to chill out on a Sunday. I like to chill out, you know. So that's why I put them to a Friday, and also the space in between each days would allow me to do a bit of research into what I'm going to talk about. But I don't think they're necessarily that bad at the moment. On my first few streams it was on the run-up to Christmas, I think it was. This is now my 6th stream. But yeah, I was worrying about having stuff to talk about. But 2026 has been the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to content to talk about. In fact, it's at that point where I don't actually know what to talk about because there's so much of it. So, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be at the peril of that one, at least, for at least the first few months or couple of months of this year. Or, well, as it goes throughout this year. So, this is the Ellis Broadcast. If this is the first time you're tuning in, I'm Ellis. This is my broadcast. And I like to talk about politics, current affairs, literature. So the books I'm listening to, or I say listen to, I do mention a lot that I read them, but I just listen to a lot of them because it just helps with my lifestyle. And I like to talk about things more on a bit of an economic slant, but to be honest with you, I've just been talking about anything that comes into my head nowadays, and that's especially how it is on my Twitter feed at the moment. Yeah, I just like to talk about what the politics of the day and what seems to be on my mind, and maybe it's on yours. So, if you do want to talk to me as we're in this stream, I am live on Rumble. And that's where I'll see the chat there. There is a specific reason for that. So I worry about my content that could lead me to get blocked on YouTube. So I want to be able to on something that I can know is on a video app that I know is reliable, that won't get me shut down if I'm talking about certain topics. And yeah. I think X is not really... I'm on X as well at the moment, streaming live. But I'm not quite sure how to use that feed, and you never know. If this government carries on the way it is, maybe X might end up being blocked in the not-so-distant future. That would certainly be the case if we ever descended to the depths of which Ed Davey and the Lib Dem Party would be in charge. And I bet a few of you are thinking, well, who's Ed Davey? Who's the Lib Dems? That would be the correct question there. Because who are the Lib Dems? Who is Ed Davey? He is not the bastion that he thinks he is. I am going off on a tangent already. But actually what I want to talk about today is to carry on with what I was talking about in my last stream. Talking about reform, talking about UK politics, talking about how our political system is in dire straits and we need a political party, one that is, well, as I went in my previous streams, we need a political party to come up and be better. It's going to need to be better than some of the best governments or political parties this country has ever seen, which I'll go into. I'll go into that in a few minutes. So last week I was criticising Reform. I was criticising Reform with the fact that they do not seem to be manning themselves with the correct quality MPs or any sort of shadow cabinet that could take them into the next general election and really, 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 really get a grip of the woes and the economic and political downturn of this country at the moment. But what's quite interesting on the lead up to last week, on the lead up to last weekend, or well, this weekend that we are on now. That's but when I put this video out tonight, you'll see this video on Rumble tonight. Maybe see on YouTube actually, because it should go straight to a video on the stream on the page. So you'll see this tonight. So this there's been an interesting development on the lead up to this weekend that I am doing this video on right now. So apparently, through a few tweets from Rupert Lowe, he is suggesting, well, first he suggested that they would be a viable, I'm trying to think of the word, a viable alternative to Reform at the next general election, which I'm assuming will be led by Rupert Lowe, because of him suggesting it by a tweet. But then he went into this weekend saying that he is going to ponder or going to think about how maybe restore Britain, or maybe his small party that has got a great Yarmouth could end up becoming some sort of national party. It was something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing here. I'm probably really bastardsizing what he said in his tweet. But he did say that he's going to think about it over this weekend. The outcome and how Rupert Lowe could end up creating a political party on a national scale. Now, I happened to watch Dan Wootton. Dan Wootton's Outspoken on Saturday morning. And although Rupert Lowe said he's thinking about the political party of which he may create or may not create, on Dan Wootton's show, but it's the first time I've actually watched Dan Wootton on a first occasion, and I thought it was actually pretty good. It's very good to put in the background in your kitchen while you're cooking, sorting all the stuff out. It's very similar to like a typical television or radio set news piece or news show. And he was saying in there, he had the exclusive that Rupert Lowe was definitely looking at setting up, or was definitely going to set up, a national party. And this is on the fallout of him polling at 9% nationally in the UK. Which is, amazing to say that he is an independent politician. But an independent politician he might be, but he is, and this is a fact, the most popular politician on social media. Despite what any other party will say, he is the most popular politician on social media at the moment. Now, instantly when Rupert Lowe starts talking about making a party, the naysayers come out of the woodwork. The people that don't really understand the point of it. I think you had people like Matt Goodwin coming out and commenting on one of his posts saying, well, why are you doing this? You're just going to fragment the right. Which, yeah, on first look, on first consideration, maybe that'd be the case. That is a risk that Rupert Lowe setting up a political party could cause, or could end up becoming quite a systemic issue. And, as these naysayers have been suggesting on social media, this could allow or pave the route for Lib Dem, Greens coalition, or another sort of left-leaning party to continue power. I don't think Labour's going to continue power, but it could mean that the left, Greens, Lib Dems, whatever, could assert more dominance in terms of seats, because of, as you know, in this country, we have a first past the post system. But here's where I would challenge this narrative. Now, I've also had this from friends and family as well. Like I've said about Rupert Lowe setting up a political party, and straight away they're like, "Well, what's the point? They're not gonna win the next general election." If Rupert Lowe set up a political party called Restore Britain tomorrow, right, and it was a national party rather than being just a political movement, they're not going to win. They're not going to win the next general election. So what's the point? What is the point voting for them? Haven't got the standard Friday night tot of whiskey to grease the wheels today, because with it being a Sunday and I've got to be up early tomorrow, and I don't need to make it any harder for me to get out of bed tomorrow morning. But anyway, people are going, well, what's the point? What's the point? They're not going to get power. And some people are going, well, it's going to fragment the right. To the point where the Green Party could be a threat. Green Party, Lib Dems, whoever could be a threat. Now, I don't think this is the point. I think it's an important consideration, but I don't think it's the point. And I don't even think people who are considering making Restore Britain a national party, or I don't even believe that Rupert, I think all of them know, even Rupert Lowe himself will probably know that they're not going to make it. They're not going to be, if he sets up this political party, which according to Dan Wootton he's going to, they will already know that this is probably not going to be the case, that they'll win the next general election. They don't have the money. You know, you look at Reform. They've got a quite a big established oligarchy behind them. You know, for a start, Nigel Farage is not exactly short of money. Neither is Richard Tice. And got the fact that they seem to have, although I don't think he's actually donating them to them directly, they seem to have the backing of Paul Marshall as well. So the guy that owns GB News, pretty much owns majority of GB News. I think got quite a big share of it. Spectator, Unheard, and he's also the father of Winston Marshall. People might have seen his podcasts online. I've watched a few of them. I think some are pretty good. And this is not a criticism. But they've got a big amount, Reform's got a big amount of money behind them. They've been established before the last general election, and they did quite well on the vote front. They did quite well on the vote front. It was literally, because we've got a first past the post system, that unfortunately it led them to only have about, it was 5 seats when they came into this current government, or this current cycle, whatever you want to call it. And, as we've seen in virtually most of the polls, they are leading pretty much everywhere. I think I can't remember which one I last saw. I think it was one shared by Matt Goodwin. So, showing that pretty much the majority of the UK could end up with a Reform seat. Really, really well represented in Wales, which is quite insane. In fact, to the point where I don't think there's any sort of representation in Wales for Labour anymore, according to a lot of polls now. I mean, I was looking at the poll, I keep talking about the poll the other week, that is showing that Labour will only have 4 seats after the next general election. 4 seats. Wouldn't that be insane? Absolutely insane. When they got over, 400 MPs at the moment? Going down to 4? Even if that was down to 40, it still would be insane. But 4. Quite incredible. So what I'm trying to get at here is Reform are pretty well established now. Although they're still referred to as a populist movement, which they are. Let's face it, they are. They seem to be on they seem to be on the lips of anybody that's in the political sphere or keeps up with politics, right? You can't talk about politics at the moment in the UK without talking about Reform and Nigel Farage. So, in terms of popularity, if Restore Britain was going to be a viable contender for Reform, they would need to be campaigning to the extreme, to the absolute extreme. I know, like I said, Rupert Lowe is very popular online, very popular on social media. But if you go into social media in the UK, right, and you look at the most trending things, most of them are about football or similar things like that, right? Politics is probably, I feel like politics, although for me, it's what I talk about all the time and I talk about with my friends and whatever else. I think for some people it's quite low down on their consideration, maybe in the UK. Maybe people might talk about the fact that, everything's becoming more expensive and they go to the shop and they talk about the fact that food's going up in price or whatever else, or houses are so completely unaffordable. Maybe they might go that far, but I think a lot of people in the UK, there's a lot of people in the UK that don't really entrench themselves with politics. Not entrench themselves, that's probably the wrong word. Don't really spend too much time talking about politics or considering politics. Which, I'm going to come into a minute, is what people should change. I'm going to come into this one. I'll promise I'll remember to come back to that one because it's a really good point at the end of this, what I want to talk about. But yes, Restore Britain doesn't have the oligarchy that Reform have. So it doesn't have the money because of campaigning to get a political party to win an election, especially a political party that isn't a part of the standard uniparty, so Tory or Labour. It is a massive feat, and it's going to take lots and lots of money. It's going to take lots and lots of campaigning. It's going to take lots and lots of personalities, big personalities, to get on the screen to talk about it. And even with today's communication systems, so social media, also tagged on, and new media also tagged on with the standard old style media, which is like television, mainstream media, print news, whatever else. That would be a massive feat to undertake. To consider that if Rupert Lowe was to set up a party tomorrow, for him to be a viable alternative that could end up beating Reform at the next general election, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. It would just too much of a massive thing. Maybe I might eat my words in the next 4 years, but it'd be a massive thing, a mean feat. And I don't actually think that needs to be the purpose of the party. Although Restore Britain, if they're going to call it that, will probably campaign to say we're going to win the next general election, or we're going to get a substantial amount of seats at the next general election, which no doubt they probably will get a few seats if they did. But I don't think behind closed doors that should be the consideration. And the reason why I say that is because ever since, even when Rupert Lowe was in Reform, but ever since Rupert Lowe has left Reform, he has sort of dragged Reform by shifting the Overton window towards the politics that I believe this country needs, and a lot of people support on the centre-right side of politics. A very fine example of it is mass deportations. Now, Rupert Lowe, according to Reform, was kicked out of the party. I'm pretty sure that that's the reason they gave for Rupert Lowe leaving Reform before they went into all the... Oh, no. Cancel my last, actually. No. So, he left Reform and they were trying to say he had dementia and he attacked Zia Yusuf and whatever else and had a police investigation that ended up getting dropped and whatever else. But another point or another reason why they kicked him out of the party was because he was too extreme with his politics. And one of them areas was mass deportation. So I can't remember which came first, but I think on the weeks running up to Rupert Lowe getting kicked out of Reform, I can remember Nigel Farage going on television and going, and one of the newsreaders, what's his name? Can't remember his name. Really good newsreader, journalist, sorry. Really good, what's his name? It doesn't matter. Anyway, he asked him the question, or something along the lines of, what's your view about mass deportations? And Nigel just started stumbling, going, oh, I don't want to get caught up down that avenue, whatever else. And I think he was pressed further to say, well, what about the people that have come over illegally? They're here. What are you going to do with them? Or have been here for quite a considerable amount of time. And he was pushy back. He pushed back on that. He avoided the question. And that was it. And then a couple of days later, Rupert Lowe was speaking to a journalist. Can't remember if it's the same journalist. I don't think so. And he was asked, well, what's your views on mass deportations? And he was like, yeah, I support it. Yeah, I support it. I support mass deportations. And then he was pressed after that saying, well, what about Nigel saying he doesn't support mass deportations? And his response was something along the lines of, well, we don't have to believe the same thing politically, or something like that. And then pretty much a few weeks later, Rupert Lowe was kicked out of Reform. The whole sort of people, the conspiracy theorists, it's not even conspiracy, I think it's pretty much most people have sort of on this consensus that maybe it was to do with the fact that Elon Musk sent out his tweet about Nigel not having what it takes to be in charge of Reform, and then there were lots of suggestions it should be Rupert Lowe and whatever else. We spoke about that in my last stream. But anyway. But what happened then after that is Rupert Lowe going out into the media and saying, I support mass deportations of illegal migrants that have come to the UK. It was found to sit well with the electorate. A lot of people were in support of it. A lot of people on the centre-right. But a lot of people generally, a lot of the general public supported that. They support mass deportation. They think that illegal migrants that have entered this country illegally should be deported en masse. They support it. But on the lead up to that revelation, Reform was still pushing back against it, I believe. But then when it was found to sit right with the electorate, sit right with the public, the Overton window shifted. Because I can remember it. Instantly, it was seen as this, the worst thing ever by all certain mainstream media outlets that Rupert Lowe supports mass deportations. I'm not even sure. I'm pretty... Was it about the time as well? He was on newsagents. And it had... what's her name as well? What's her name? Well, I can't remember her name. The woman on newsagents, which is an offshoot. I'm not sure if it's on the radio itself, but it's certainly something that's organised by the by Global Radio, which is pretty much just Tony Blair radio. yeah, he was then referred to as a racist, of which he really well argued against that. I'm not sure if it was around that was sort of a lean onto it, or that may have been after. Not quite sure of the timeline. But anyway, because it had sat well with the general public, because en masse deportations had sat well with the general public, it shifted the Overton window. And a few months later, Reform came out in support of mass deportations. Now, I think this is what Restore Britain will do if they set up a national party. Because what you're finding on social media is Rupert Lowe is tweeting about certain policies, certain political suggestions, certain things that he would change if he was in charge. And it's being received well. And somehow, a few months later, because the Overton window is still shifting, it seems to be dragging Reform. Reform then end up taking up similar policies to what Rupert Lowe is suggesting. It's almost as if Rupert Lowe is not in Reform anymore, but he leads their manifesto. He is the test case for their manifesto. He'll suggest something, and then it will be sort of how it lands with the general public will be assessed, and then Reform end up being, adopting similar policies. And that's what they need to do, because if it's highly likely that Reform will get in at the next general election. In fact, most people are talking as if that's going to be the case. And unless something insane happens over the next few years, it's going to be the case. It's going to be Reform in some sort of way, whether that be Reform Tory coalition or Reform Restore Britain coalition. I don't know, right? But Reform are probably going to be in some sort of power after the next general election. Now, I don't know if people understand how it works with manifestos and how political change can be contested in the House of Lords. But essentially, if a political party has got a policy in their manifesto and they are voted in based upon that manifesto, then that policy is unable to be challenged in the House of Lords. So as you might have guessed already, that's exactly what Restore Britain need to do. That's exactly what they will do if they did start. No, they won't get into power. Maybe they'll get a couple of seats. Maybe they'll have to go in coalition with Reform. Wouldn't that be a revelation? Reform kicked out Rupert Lowe, but now his political party's in a coalition with them. But I generally believe because Rupert Lowe is not in it to seat himself up or to ascend up the greasy pole. I generally believe, from what I'm seeing so far, what he talks about in social media and what he does on podcasts, he is in politics to try and change Britain for the better. So because he's doing that, he's not scared of talking about political policy that could end up being him being called a racist. He doesn't care about the establishment saying that that's wrong. He doesn't care about that because he's doing what he believes is right for this country. And he's very vocal about it. And because he's vocal about it, I believe if Restore Britain were to set up a party, that he would drag Reform along with the Overton window, that he's shifting, which will ultimately mean that their manifesto is filled with the right things that could or fill with the things that the general public want, but the establishment doesn't, that will inevitably end up pulling Britain out of its dire situation at the moment. Or remedying broken Britain. Which there seems to be a debate on it within the Tory party at the moment, as if Britain isn't broken. I think Kemi's come out and said that Britain is not broken, which just really shows what the problem with the Tory party at the moment. Because if they can't understand the problems with the country, if they can't understand that Britain is broken, because it is, politically and economically, Britain is broken. If they cannot get a handle of that, how the fuck are they going to make the right changes to get us out of this situation? How the fuck are they going to do that? So, I have no doubt. Like I say, I've got a couple of friends who are adamant that the Tories will make a turnaround by the next general election. They're the longest serving ever party, and they've not descended to the depths. They've not been eradicated as much as the polls are suggesting ever. I absolutely now, I think I disagree with them. I disagree. I was sort of on the fence, but now I totally disagree. And the reason why I disagree is because what I wanted to get into next, defections. Defections. I'll have a quick sip of my water before we get into this one. So, you may have seen my stream last week when I was talking about Nadim Sahari. Or Nadim Sahavi. Nadim Sahari. I think I pronounced his name incorrectly a bit, right? But who gives a fuck, right? So, Nadim Sahari defected to Reform, was it last weekend, early last week? And I went on the attack. I'm not going to call it attack. I was criticising that quite a lot, right? Because of, as I suggested, Reform need a team. And they need to be canvassing up and down the UK for Britain's best. They also need to absorb people who are already in politics. Because if Reform are going to recruit a lot of people without political experience, although they might be very experienced in management, leadership, stakeholder management, being able to speak in a public forum, they probably won't have much political experience. So that is why Reform absolutely do need to man themselves with MPs that are in Parliament. That's understandable, right? But what I was getting at on my last stream was they don't need to be manning themselves with poor quality Tories. Tories that I don't even think Kemi lost sleep over losing. Nadim Doris, Nadim Sahari, the guy that called for a immigration amnesty of illegal migrants. Which is totally contradictory of Reform's stance on illegal migration and deportations and the lowering of immigration altogether. He called for an amnesty on illegal migrants. Insane. And he also was a champion of the vaccine passport. He wanted to bring in vaccine passports, which, as I spoke about in my last stream, it's just damn right Orwellian. It's just, in my opinion, if that was brought in, it would just be an utter disgrace. But he wanted to bring him in, and I was talking about the fact that if Reform recruited some good Tory politicians like Katie Lamb, Nick Timothy, that I don't think people would be bothered. And the media will probably say, oh yeah, recruiting more Tories, it's just end up becoming the Tory party. But if they man themselves with top quality Tory politicians, I don't think the general public, I think most of the general public, or most of the people that keep up with politics anyway, will probably be like, yeah, fair one. Yeah, fair one. Yeah, that makes sense. Very good politician. But, and this is where I want to correct myself this week. I did say, or on that list of good Tory politicians, that people would be like, yeah, fair one. Yeah, fair one, he defected. But it's great they've actually managed to get them in the party. I did say Robert Jenrick. I put Robert Jenrick in that list. And I may have demonstrated my ignorance when it comes to understanding the history of Robert Jenrick in the Tory party. So I am falling on my sword here. I am here to correct myself. So after he defected to Reform, which was quite an endeavour in the first place. So if anybody doesn't know, he was in talks with Reform to defect. He had a mole in his office or amongst his staff who had let Kemi know. And Kemi thought that this was going to be announced at 4 o'clock on Thursday, Friday, whatever, right? Because Reform had a press conference. It actually turns out the Reform wasn't going to talk about it on that conference. But she thought they were, and she wanted to get ahead of it, so she ended up doing a social media post, right? Which, you know, I can understand her trying to get ahead of it. You know, I can understand her trying to do that, and I get the sentiment of it, but it ended up just becoming totally disastrous, right? She came on social media in what looks like, I think someone's joked, almost looks like in a travel lodge, with a grainy background, right? With a sort of blurred screen like you would if you're in some sort of office environment or somewhere, right? And she just appeared to be reading from a script, like a total robot, right? Which, it just didn't come off well. Like, if she was wanting to tug on the heartstrings of the British public, saying that she's been seen off by one of the most senior political figures in the Tory party, and, you know, I'm doing this to get ahead of it because I want to put I'm trying to think of the word. I want to put the needs of Britain first, and I think this is incompatible for what we're doing. You know, at least have a good fucking background on your video. At least try and do it like I am, maybe a bit more practiced off the cuff. Maybe not totally off the cuff like I'm talking here. But come on, at least be more of a human. And it just went down like a lead balloon. And inevitably, that 4 o'clock press conference that wasn't going to be about Robert Jenrick ended up becoming about Robert Jenrick and defecting to Reform. But what I didn't realise is, which is another contradiction to Reform's promise to the public of sorting out the illegal migrant crisis in the UK, was that Robert Jenrick was in the position and boasted about doing well in that position of sourcing migrant hotels to put these illegal migrants into. That was his job when the Tories were in power. One of the responsibilities that he had as a cabinet minister when the Tories were last in power. Now, I think he said something along the lines of, you know, I knew that was wrong, but that's something I needed to, that was the position I was in, I had to do that. I think he come up with some sort of elaborate excuse for it. But if you knew that was wrong, why did you do it? And this is what I get at with these Tory chameleons that keep going over to reform at the moment. I generally don't believe that they want to put the best interests of Britain first. I do not believe that. Because if they did, he wouldn't have partaked. He wouldn't stayed in government. He wouldn't have stayed in government, and he certainly wouldn't have boasted about sourcing migrant hotels. If he did really care about Britain and putting the needs of Britain first, he would have resigned. He would have resigned. He would have refused to do it or resigned. Right? But this is what it is. These Tories don't care. These ex-Tories don't care. They're just there to climb the greasy pole. They are there. They are going across to reform because they know the Tories' ticket has come to an end. They know that the Tories are finished at the next general election. So like rats off a sinking ship, they're going across to reform so they can shore up their political careers. That is what it is. I'm convinced about it. I am convinced. Because I'm telling you now, people just don't have an epiphany. They don't, well, they do. But I tell you now, these people, right, don't just change their spots. No, they don't just change their spots over the next few years or a few years after they were suggesting these insane policies like a vaccine passport. Because I can remember at the time, I can remember it being suggested, these vaccine passports. And already, straight away, I was like, no way. That should be blocked at all costs. And the reason why is because I understand the Orwellian nature to it. And I'm convinced these MPs also probably understand the Orwellian nature to it. Now, these people are not thick. But the reason why they do it is because it allows them to climb up the greasy pole. And that's all it is. And they're going to cross to reform, and they're going to carry on climbing up the greasy pole there. Because they know that reform are highly likely to get in after the next general election. I genuinely believe this. But some people have suggested that the appointment of Robert Jenrick in reform will challenge the leadership. Certainly challenge the leadership when it comes to Zia Youssef. Now, Zia Youssef is already being penned to take over Nigel Farage when he eventually abdicates the throne of reform. But now Robert Jenrick's in that place. Now Robert Jenrick's there. Maybe that's not definite. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah. But yes, anyway, going back to the fact, yes, I don't think Robert Jenrick would be one of those characters. Now we've learned a lot about his history that people will be like, yeah, fair one. That fair one, he's gone over to reform. Fair one that reform's managed to recruit him because of, yeah, what's come out of the woodwork is absolutely to the contrary. But another thing I want to talk about, as a final note, is a book I've been reading. Now, I know I commit to myself, if people have been watching my streams, I commit to myself to reading one book a week. And I think I'm the second week in that I've started this anyway. And I've already probably going to be failing this one. So last week I finished by Friday, I think, last week, the biography of William Pitt the Younger by William Hague. Really, really good book. I recommend everybody to read it because of instantly I was reading it. So William Pitt the Younger is considered to be the greatest prime minister that this country has ever had, and he had a strong political party behind him. Political parties are not a strong Prime Minister needs a very strong team behind them. Okay. And, like you say, he, like I said, was considered to be the greatest Prime Minister that this country's ever had. And what's quite good about that book is it allows you to read it, allows you to understand why he was, and also allows you to put him on a pedestal to compare to our current governments of the day or prospective governments after the next general election. And one amazing thing about that book is that he managed to turn the economic downturn of Britain, very similar to the extent of what we got now, within his first term. And what I've been suggesting in my previous streams is that whoever the next political party is that gets in power, which is probably highly likely going to reform, they need to do something similar, because if there will only be one term for them if they do not deliver what is promised. And turning around the economic position of this country at the moment is one of the things that they are promising that they will get a grip of. Because people are sick of the gaslighting, they're sick of the bollocks, they're sick of the lies, they're sick of the false promises. And I tell you now, if they do not deliver on what they're promising already, never mind what Rupert Lowe will drag them to promise, or drag them into promising, will restore Britain, they cannot go back on these promises because people have no patience for politics anymore. So that book was brilliant of understanding just the level of competence that this next government's going to need. And then it allows you to understand just how much they're not there yet. I don't think, because they don't even have a shadow cabinet. They don't have a good team. They don't even seem to be canvassing for good teams at the moment, which is something that Restore Britain will have to do if they do start a political party. But it'd be interesting to see if that happens. But yeah, they're not even canvassing for a good team, and that's been my criticism now for the past few weeks. But the book I'm reading at the moment is a book called Why Westminster Works and Why It Doesn't, by Ian Dunt. Now, as I said a few weeks ago when I talked about William Pitt the Younger, the book, that his biography, I don't want this to be some sort of book review club, because that's not why I'm doing this. And I'm pretty much halfway through this book at the moment. And actually, thinking about it now, I know I commit myself to one book a week, but this is 5 hours longer than William Pitt's biography. So maybe that's... I was sort of in the same place on Friday, so maybe I'm not doing that bad. But this book is brilliant because it talks about how inept our current political system is at the moment. And how, which is, although when you're reading it, you sort of think, yeah, I knew that already. But you just sort of understand the systems a bit more that's causing the ineptness of the political system. But we have got a political system at the moment which becomes very clear in this book that doesn't reward change that would benefit the country. It rewards change that will suit the political party of the day. And even to the point where a lot of the political decisions being made is to just suit the individual minister that's in charge. And how I refer to it now is we just got a 5-minute government. They don't care about long-term investment that would benefit the future. Because of that would give that political policy, if it does turn out to be successful, that would enable the next party or the next political party down the line that ends up in power, that could be a political enemy, to gain the reward, to gain the... I'm trying to think of the word. The gratitude of the public, right? People know what I'm getting at, right? which is crazy. Which is utter crazy. So, for example, I know in the north, where I come from, for jobs, there's not many high-paying roles. The access to high-paying roles is very low. But if a government was to bring in, I don't know, some sort of way of benefiting that, or ameliorating that situation, to bring more investment into an area, thus making more jobs. But if that policy or that strategy that they was going to bring in was going to take 10 years or 20 years to come to fruition, it's not likely they'll do that. It's not likely that they'll champion it. It's not likely they'll put that into motion, because of that, as I say, could end up really just benefiting a political party down the line that isn't the one that's championing this policy today, and could be a political enemy of the party that's in at the moment. This is the way they think. And another thing I thought was quite interesting, I thought was absolutely insane, is the fact that the individual ministers, so you might notice at the moment that Labour front bench, they have ministers in charge of departments who have absolutely zero experience about anything to do with what that department delivers. For example, the DEFRA minister, the farming minister, Angela Eagle, probably has never set foot on a farm. She probably purchased her first set of wellies when she got into that position. It's the same as the business secretary. He doesn't even have any business experience. Same as the Chancellor. The Chancellor lied on her CV, saying that she was some sort of economist in HBOS or whoever else, and actually it turned out she was sort of in charge of some sort of IT or complaints department, right? So the one person that they were championing and put in her position because of her experience, she didn't even end up having it. It's insane that she was even allowed to keep a job after that, but that's a totally different story. But you would think, if you've got a political party, that you're going to put the people in the ministerial positions who have got experience in them areas, because they would be able to advise and sign off policies that would benefit the country. But no, they don't do that. Political positions are handed out due to favour. They're handed out as per favour. So, essentially, who's kissed the arse of the Prime Minister of the day? And actually, it's seen as almost a bit of a threat to Prime Ministers to put a person in these ministerial seats who've got experience, because they could undermine the direction of the Prime Minister. To the point where, in this book, it goes into the fact that a lot of Prime Ministers seem to make up governmental policy on the sofa in 10 Downing Street, off the cuff, on the back of the fag packet. Because that's all this government cares about. Because all this political party cares about is the next policy, the next thing that's going to look good. It's going to look good in the eyes of the media and look good to the people. And it needs to be cheap because they have no money. And it needs to be quick because of next week it'll be old news. But you also don't want to have a long-term policy that's going to hand over the reward to the next political party. So that is why you see crazy shit coming out of the government, like trying to ban, this is trying to ban non-alcoholic drinks to children or people under the age of 18 because it apparently will, or it's got the possibility, and it won't have come from any sort of data set, and if it does, I would love to see it, right? But this is why they bring in policies to ban non-alcoholic drinks for under 18s, because they feel like it will cause them to become alcoholics in adult life. And I don't think it comes from a data set. I'd be surprised if it does. But the reason why they're doing that is because they know the media will be all talking about it. The next best thing, they're trying to show that Labour are trying to do something, even though it's utter fucking bollocks. We know that this current government doesn't have what it takes to sort out the woes of this country. They're not even challenging the political system that stops them from doing that. Very interesting book. Very interesting book to read, and I advise people to read it. But why am I telling you this? Why am I telling you this? Because of, like I said, the system is broken. This next political party is going to have to change it. And when you've got a government that only cares about the next 5 minutes and how good it sounds on social media, on social media, but in media in general, and doesn't care for long-term policies, and you have ministers that are not experienced in the positions they're in, who are actually, if you're reading this book, massively overworked, who are quite often tired, have worked 7 days a week, 10, 11-hour days for weeks on end, who are not only having to deal with the politics of Westminster, but having to deal with the politics of their constituencies, who are signing off policies that they don't even interpret properly, don't even read properly, don't even understand properly. Now, this is the extent of which government is at the moment, right? And what's quite scary is these same ministers that are a part of this system that are also making decisions on a world stage. They are making a decision on geopolitics. They are making decisions based upon conflicts like Ukraine, Russia, where on a serious level, you've got other countries like Russia. You literally got Russia at the moment saying that they are considering using nuclear weapons on Britain and Germany. If you don't believe me, go and watch Tucker Carlson's latest podcast talking about it. That's a scary bit. That's a scary bit. We have got a political party that doesn't work. And these people are making decisions that can affect us on a global stage. I mean, we're seeing with Trump tariffs as well. These Trump tariffs coming in. So this is why, more than ever, this next political party that comes in, whether it be Restore Britain, probably not, whether it be a Reform Tory coalition or just Reform in general, they really, really need to get a grip. Because of, it's just to think if they don't. I mean, we're not even talked about sectarian votership yet, and the rise of sectarian votership that could alter general elections after this next one. But anyway, I think I've rabbited on enough there. I think I've made a fool of myself enough for today. If you have ventured your way onto my stream, my off-the-cuff stream as per. In fact, there's one thing I missed out that I promised I was going to say and talk about. I'm going over time here, but I'll talk about it. Now, I often get accused especially when I'm snippeting up my streams to go on to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube Shorts. I often get accused, one, of people saying that, I just criticise reform. I don't want reform to do well. I'm trying to be edgy. And that is why I'm criticising reform. And I'm not. I'm not trying to be edgy. I'm not trying to criticise reform because it will get me cred, get me notoriety on social media. I'm absolutely not doing that for that fact. I'm doing it because I know reform are probably going to get in the next general election. And I know it's voices like myself, although not many people watch me at the moment, but I'm expressing my voice. And with every one person that expressing their voice, there's probably 5, 10, 15,000, 100,000 supporters of that voice who've got a similar opinion. And I'm hoping, or the reason why I'm doing this is because of I want this country to be better. I want this country to do better. I think reform are going to get in the next general election. And if I can even have a little snippet of influence on the politics of the day to make this country better, then this is why I'm here doing it. Because ultimately, I've got a 7-month-old son, and I worry about how Britain will be over the next few years, or when he's growing up and going into adult life. I want him to have opportunities in this country that his grandparents and his great-grandparents will have had. That's what I want. I want him to have as much success in this country as possible, because I believe this country's still got the capability for it. And that's why I'm here doing this. This is why I'm here. I'm not doing this to climb the greasy pole. I'm not doing this to line my pockets. I'm doing this for free. I don't get paid. Spoiler alert, I don't get paid to do any of this because I don't have enough viewers or anybody else. And any sort of money I probably will get from this, I'll probably reinvest back into making this production better. But I'm not doing it to line my pockets. I'm not doing it to be edgy. I'm not doing it for notoriety on social media. I'm doing it because I think that this is the only way I've got to try and make this country better for everybody and for me and my family. The second thing I want to talk about is that I often get accused of not coming up with solutions. People come, all you're doing is moaning about politics, moaning about reform, moaning about Tories, Labour, whatever else, right? And I do, and a lot of that I do, and I am conscious that I'm not coming out with a lot of solutions. Yes, I've been suggesting what political parties need to be doing in sort of recruiting a team and whatever else. But I am conscious that sometimes I may be moaning and groaning about the politics of the day without a solution. Now, my solution is that we are going to need more voices over the next few years. We're going to need more people putting their head above the parapet and saying what they think. We're going to need more people admitting that Britain has got a problem and we need to do something about it. We need to have more people shifting the Overton window. We need to have more people having conversations. We need to have more people influencing politics of the day. And the only way we do that is more voices. More people doing similar stuff to what I'm doing here. Talking on social media, talking on streams, giving their opinion, talking to anybody who will listen to me. Trying to help people or educate people about politics or educate people about the ineptness of this government. But if you're someone sat here now watching this and thinking, how do I make a change? How can I hate the politics of the day. I think that everything's getting more expensive. I want to make a change. How do I get involved? Do this. Become a voice. But what people need to also do is educate themselves. Now, this is a journey for me. And I'm using this as a way of doing just that. I want people to get involved. I want people to debate me. I want people to say I'm wrong so I can understand why and formulate and change my opinion or change my understanding so I know what is right. I want that to happen. But also people need to be reading more books. That's why I commit myself to reading a book a week. Because how can you want to push for change when you don't understand what you are changing? So I've started trying to read books about the establishment, non-fiction books about history, establishment, what's going on for this government. I'm going to start venturing into a bit of philosophy. And the reason why that is because it gives you the arsenal. It gives you the knowledge. It also helps with your vocabulary. Helps being able to talk to people. Helps me be able to rabbit on for an hour and 8 minutes on here off the cuff. And it will help you develop your voice. That's my logic. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm reading more books. Trying to stuff my brain with enough knowledge as possible. Because I know if I can make my voice stronger, it's more likely to be heard. I'm going to leave that there. But anyway, if whatever you're viewing me on, whether it be one of my snippets of this stream that will come out probably tomorrow, or whatever social streaming medium that you're viewing me on, whether it be X, Rumble, YouTube, do not forget to give me a like, subscribe, follow, get some comments in there. Don't be afraid, as long as they're constructive. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if you don't agree. But do not forget to do whatever you need to do to make sure that you keep up with my streams in future. My next stream is due on Tuesday. I'll definitely be on that one. Not quite sure what I'm going to talk about. I've kept the thumbnail actually a bit universal now. I'm going to keep that going because I did have a lot more things to talk about on this stream today. But I've ended up taking longer, labouring on stuff that I didn't expect to take as long. So, and you know what? I quite like it off the cuff. I quite like talking about whatever and preaching about whatever. And maybe we go down a tangent that I didn't expect. I don't want to be bound by my thumbnail. Although I've kept it quite close to the description. But yeah, we'll talk on Tuesday. I don't know what I'm going to talk about yet, but I suspect there'll be a lot more controversy in the political sphere, or the politics of this government, or the geopolitics of the world before then. So yes, if you are listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for saying hello. If you've said any hello on any of my streams. I'm not checked to YouTube or X. And yeah, I'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you.